We're back. This is Illiterate. My name is Evan.
My name is Taylor. I read a book this week.
I watched the show. This week we are covering Shadow and Bone. And something special about this episode, this is a listener suggestion. As you know, we were off last week, and man, is this a good one. This is timing out so well. This is in the Netflix top 10, and it's been there for a couple weeks. This was released April 23rd, and it's still holding strong in the Netflix top 10.
Spent the first 12 days of its release at number 1.
Oh, wow.
A listener said, "Why aren't you doing this?" And we said, "Why aren't we?" And so here we are doing it.
Good point. So here we are. Gotcha.
So send us in suggestions.
Seriously, I say it at the end of every episode, but you never know when we'll do something that you're super into.
Evan and I were not acquainted with it all, which is why we were not
I'm shocked.
privy.
I'm shocked to learn that this has a massive fan base and it's incredibly popular just before the Netflix release. So this is a whole world, and I'm really excited to see what's in this, because it's definitely stands a little bit different from others like it. So this is another kind of chosen one story. A young person discovers powers and then goes to hone those powers at some training facility full of the world's best,
and is reluctant, and there's an evil darkness taking over the land. Voldemort.
Exactly. So
Sauron, whoever. Yeah.
But I'm excited to see how this one it really has some own feet of its own. But anyway,
the big thing, the feat of its own, is a Slavic influence.
Right.
Seeing something different from the usual British monarchy, knights, dragons, and elves.
It seems to always be British,
Yeah.
the fantasy realm. You almost like have an instant image of what that is and what that's going to be. So right off of the bat, this doesn't have those influences breathing down your neck. So visually, it's a little bit different from things that are of the same vein.
Like you said, massive. 7 books total with some short story collections. The Grisha-verse, because Grisha is the name of the small science/magician power characters.
Right.
22 languages it's been translated to in over 50 countries.
Oh, man.
Huge.
That's
Just because this will factor into the show and how it gets fit together. The first book is called Shadow and Bone. Came out in 2012, number 8 on the New York Times bestsellers list. And then it had a trilogy. The next book came out in 2013, and then the next one in 2014. Just boom, boom, boom.
In that Twilight Hunger Games craze.
Yeah, very shortly after that.
Yes.
Then comes a different series set in the same place, but 2 years after, with all new characters in a different country in this world, called the Six of Crows duology. Both of those books next year, 2015, 2016. And then there's another duology, which is the sequel to the Shadow and Bone trilogy, which takes place a year after the Six of Crows thing, other characters, and that came out in 2019 and 2021, so that's 7 altogether.
Oh my God.
All of it factors into this. I'll explain.
And they're going to do them all, baby.
Somewhat, yeah. They got the hankering. But we'll start with the author, because I'm always fascinated. This is where
exactly.
Evan and I come in as working writers in all fields and capacities in the entertainment world. We're
doing our deal,
know.
so that we want to know how people, what decisions they made, what were the factors at play. And as we've uncovered on this show, many factors come into play, and there are also commonalities. So we're looking out for that kind of thing.
And I wish we should probably have some sort of like a repeating song or theme for when, like, oh, here's another one of those moments. Yeah. Leigh Bardugo is her name, Israeli-American young adult author. So all these books are in the young adult fantasy genre. She was born in Jerusalem, but grew up in LA. And her father's side is the Sephardic Jewish group, Moroccan specifically. And then on her mother's side is Ashkenazi Jew, which is she's Russian and Lithuanian on her mother's side. So very interesting influence
starting to see some of
Oh, she was raised by her grandparents, though, in LA. And she had said not a lot of kids around, felt really isolated, which also does tie into it's almost the trope of this kind of story, but the orphan kid.
Right.
And then she also has I guess, semi-rare bone disease.
Oh, really?
And so she sometimes has to use a cane. And this is why Kaz, in the thieving group of the story, is young and has a cane.
Oh, fascinating.
And this is a part of her life experience.
Wow.
So books for her are a huge refuge growing up. She said her favorites, Dune, which hopefully we will cover when it comes out.
Coming soon.
The Princess Bride, which we just covered.
Yes.
And Stephen King, she also loves, who we've also covered a million times. So then she attended Yale and graduated in 97 for English. So she knows she's in this area of life. She's not,
she's in her wheelhouse.
Hygienist
She knows,
or whatever.
yep.
Yeah. But she's working in kind of what I call in this time shadow careers, sort of copywriting, journalism. She's even writing movie trailers.
Oh, interesting. Yep.
Not fully on it, but
I know what you mean.
Yeah. Her father's death occurs. There's sort of this ending of this troubled marriage relationship that she's had. She said it was a very weird rock bottom. And in a sarcastic way, in an interview, she said, "My tombstone will read had potential." Like that's how she felt there.
No.
So this is when she decides to write Shadow and Bone during her next job, where she is a makeup artist part-time. Remember, she's living in LA. And this is kind of one of the repeating themes, the sort of, well, screw it story,
Right.
So she picked her 35th birthday as the deadline, which would be 5 months from then. But of course, it's not like, oh, she wrote the story in 5 months. Like, no, it took her 35 years to get this done.
Right.
That's always the trope, is like, oh my God, 5 months? Like, no, she hadn't been working on this.
No, she had 35 years to pick and file away and remember and,
Yeah, and then have
35 years of being conscious.
To have the attitude to say, I've got to get this done in 5 months or else who am I?
Yeah.
But in terms of getting this for people to read, she said she got extremely lucky. Kind of reminded me of the Love Simon, Love Victor stuff that we talked about. Yeah, because she said at this point, everybody wanted dystopian. Divergent had just come out. The Hunger Games had finished up very recently. So she queried some agents, getting representation, getting sold with the 3-book deal just within 37 days.
Wow. Whoa.
Which is, exactly like the other one. Like, that doesn't happen. Getting all the deals, it's coming out. Of course, it took 18 months to get the book finally into people's hands with edits and blah, blah, blah. But that kind of
process.
Yeah. That kind of made me think about the success of the book series without getting into the whole plot and the characters and
Sure.
what's her take on it. And she had said, from a thematic standpoint, a lot of found families in her books. And she said, quote, "Maybe I'm telling kids to find their tribes. I didn't find mine until college." So that young adult, that would resonate with her audience. And then the fan base in the similar Love Simon, Love Victor stuff, her presence online and Tumblr following, building them. And she was like,
smart.
Yeah. And relating, like a lot of them are aspiring writers, she said. I want them to succeed. I want to be at their signing someday.
Aw.
And that energy.
That's good. That's amazing. Yeah.
Her energy carries over. I saw a video that she posted on Instagram when they had the filming of the show. And it's a compilation of her hugging everyone on set and crying. Like, it's so beautiful because she is so appreciative of all this and like seeing it realized.
Yeah, I watched one interview with her and she mentioned another time just like being on set and tearing up. And so I got that sense immediately.
Yeah, she's not, having the hubris.
Yeah, just like grateful, just like in awe that it's happening. Like, that's amazing.
And seeing it realized.
Not like, that's not what I would have put them in. Wrong color.
Right. Yeah. And that we'll get to that when it comes to the film creation and how she works with people. But in terms of just bare bones, the writing Shadow and Bone, the writing process of it all. Like I said, what Evan and I do, what we're interested in, how did she do it? How did she write? Like we talk about that with J.K. Rowling. Like, good God. Like, she didn't stop. God, 2012, 13, 14, 15, 16. Like, up to now, she's writing books like wildfire.
Yeah.
And so I saw an interview she was saying, like, she wanted to be a writer from the time she was a kid. And like we said, didn't complete the first novel until she was 35. Wow. But she said the big thing was she would always give up after the first act or not really know anything about story structure or having a writing process for yourself. And this is the thing I struggle with. Every writer struggles with.
Same. I'm sitting here going like, I know, I'm right there with you, girl.
And she said a big thing is banishing ideas from what media shows you it is, like a montage and you're crumpling papers and then it comes out the typewriter and you're done and you're a genius.
Mm-hmm.
She was like, the idea of revision is nowhere in media.
Right.
Being a writer is the process of living in discomfort of what's in your head.
Right.
Versus
right.
what you're actually, she said, what you're actually putting down. Like you don't feel like a genius.
Right. Sometimes you just got to get through a scene and you're going to be returning to it, but you have to get to the next one,
So I definitely appreciated, it's all the platitudes of, well, you got to have a process, but you don't really understand it until you're actually doing it. And that is the job. That is the hard part. So I appreciate that she's like, well, that's what I needed to learn as well. So here comes, there's this duology, Six of Crows, that fits in the middle.
Right.
And like I said, it doesn't tie into the same characters. It's a couple years after. It's the same world, but a completely different country.
I always I know it's like jarring. I didn't like it as a child when I would consume media that would like a sequel to something that wouldn't pick up where I thought, but as now studying story, being a writer of my own, now when I come across these things and I see a follow-up that just like puts their pin in the map at some wild place and time that you would, I'm now as a writer, I go, oh, there's a reason. There's a good reason they chose instead of just pick it up the same moment. That's when there wasn't anything else to go. Well, okay, pick it up. Where are we? Right back in it. No, when they've just picked out a pin somewhere in a place and time that you just like, what? So that character is like he's dead.
This
like,
is years later. Yeah,
like Korra and Avatar. It's just there's usually a reason. There's a specific reason, and that right immediately has my ears going like, oh, they're really thinking about this. Not just like I need more of this character like a drug.
Yeah, and she was saying that comes down to the process too. Again, mad respect, because she was saying for a writer, quote, we create challenges. We need to be excited, not repeat what we've done.
Right.
So that was a big part of this. Six of Crows, the duology, this two-part series that has completely different characters, is a heist caper. It's not the lone chosen one story. It's completely different. She was like, I'd never written anything like that before. Never had multiple points of view. There's 6 main characters.
It's a lot.
Flashbacks,
they are set. I mean, immediately, I had on 4 episodes today, and in the first 10 minutes, they're ready for prequels. They're ready for a whole other series. In addition to, it's thick.
But that comes with her being like, okay, that was a story. This is a completely different story of a type and scope and breadth that I've never touched before. So that's also part of the writing process.
That cognizance, that just being able to put the wall, like, oh, that is something different. That is, being able to put those walls up wherever they are, just to give yourself context where you're going. I respect that so much.
Me too. Yeah. So she's off on it now. Of course, Hollywood, prying eyes on the literary scene, swoops in. David Heyman of Harry Potter episode, which we fame. Swooping in 2012, bought the rights, says, oh, this is my next young adult film series, epic, everything. Had a screenwriter attached.
He was
going
ready.
through the producerial motions, but didn't go through. And so you think, God, a book with millions and millions of copies sold, trilogies, duologies, adding to it. What's become of this? And it ends up, obviously, this year being made by this guy, the showrunner, now a TV show, Eric Heisserer, and it almost didn't happen for him, and I love the way that it did. Yeah. So this is Eric's story of how he ends up making the show.
When does he come into the picture?
So 4.5 years ago, Arrival is getting great reviews. It was the Amy Adams Alien First Contact thing.
Denis Villeneuve, yeah.
Yeah. He wrote that, adapted from a short story, was doing super well. He's written a bunch of other screenplays as well, but this is the time and place. He also had finished an adaptation of Bird Box, which which was about to get picked up by Netflix, and so that obviously we know did super well. But he has a personal problem, which is every book or story he's reading now, it's in how can I adapt this mode, and it's not fun at all to consume any literary media.
He's burnt out on the reconfiguration.
Yeah, but he's great. I mean, he's really good at it.
Right. No, of course. But you're in that mode for so long, and every once in a while you want to explore different gear. I can understand, man. That makes so much sense. To feel like you're playing with all these things like puzzle pieces, but they're not yours. And at some point, you've done all this with all these things. You've rebuilt it, and people and you're good at it.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not. They're not. It's it feels not yours in a way. So I can understand that. Well, can I really dig into something that I have a little bit more ownership on? Can I get these creative muscles that I haven't been afforded to use? Can I get them working a little bit better? I can really see that.
Well, it's even in his case less of the doing something of his own ownership, but more just this whole side of my life, the pleasurable, I'm going to sit down and read a good book. My mind is thinking, how can I turn this into a movie?
What would the movie version be?
Yeah.
Good
and he's
Lord.
like, I just want to get
turn it off.
Yeah. So he makes a pact with himself. I'm going to get back to reading for pleasure, for the enjoyment, not even thinking about any of this nonsense. So on friends' advice,
you couldn't make me make this into a movie.
Yeah. This is his mindset. On a friend's advice, they say, well, why don't you pick up this book, 6 of Crows, that just came out that I liked? He trusts his friend.
You won't make it into a movie.
Well, he didn't say that. He said, I'm not going to do it. So he reads 6 of Crows. Now, bearing in mind, like I said, all the trilogy starting with Shadow and Bone has already come out. 6 of Crows is the alternate other thing, heist one. He loves it, devours it. Another part of his resolution, which I think is great, is that he decided, I'm going to acknowledge other creators whose work excites me, which is always nice to be grateful and just show some love to. It's like
gratitude.
Yeah. You can run much farther on compliments when you're making something. So he tweets mentioning Leigh Bardugo, saying, "Hey, love the book, thanks." Forgets about it. Then he continues to read all the books in the series. This is his pleasure reading. Not even thinking about adapting.
Tweets back, would never make it into it.
Yeah. Over a year later, somebody from Netflix calls him, and they say, "Eric, we know you like the Grishaverse books." And he's like, "How in the world?
Who told you?"
Yeah. Just seems like very...
I told no one.
Yeah. "Hey, Eric, we know you like this."
Except for all on Twitter.
Yeah. So what had happened was the rights had reverted back to Bardugo out of David Heyman's hand because he didn't do anything with it. So she's shopping it around, and she said to Netflix, this guy Eric is a fan. He tweeted at me once that he liked it. Now he's nominated for an Academy Award.
Oh, Lord.
For this thing, should we call him?
Lord.
But what I think is beautiful about this is it's amazing that his resolve to just read for his own enjoyment and uplift other creators brought him a job.
He fell right back into it.
Yeah.
He can't help himself. I love it.
No, well, he's just being a good person.
I love it. No, it's the way it should be. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's good natured and wholesome.
Yeah.
Finally, I need a little just a little sunshine this week. Thank you. Just nice things.
But here's his caveat to it all. He said, "I'm not going to touch it unless I also have 6 of Crows." All those characters, the heist characters, all that stuff, that was his gateway drug to it after all. That's what got him interested because he started in the middle.
Yeah. That makes sense now, because that's the biggest thing that I've heard is that the dark villain character that they set up immediately is not even part of the original book. And they plucked that out of the side story that came later, which is the one that he was all about, right? So that's why we got to get them in on this one. Then they find a good way. They find a good way to do it, and the appropriate zhuzhing of the characters to get that inciting incident to get them intrinsically involved off the bat.
Yeah,
really good stuff, and not being too precious with the source material, just enough to where you can make some new doors for yourself. It was really good stuff there in terms of reappropriating and just enough reconfiguration.
And that's what he's most into. Netflix, though, said, "Well, we don't have those rights." And he said, "Okay, best of luck," and doesn't accept it because he had a show in the works at AMC.
He's
like, well, I don't need, whatever. But then his show that he was working with at AMC fell through, and he was like, why did I have so much swagger? How could I do this to myself?
I'm an idiot.
How did I turn them down?
I'd say,
yeah.
I shouldn't have thrown those papers.
I shouldn't have
I need
swore.
to go get the tire marks off of the concrete.
Luckily, Netflix got the rights to them all, and then he signed on, boom, boom, boom. Here we are. But like you said, how do you have something where it's this massive universe, all these characters, all these different magic powers?
How are you going to get these two people to, you got the inceptor of it. Now you have the new arbiter of it. How will these two people ever agree? How does it ever happen?
A totally different medium. Leigh was an executive producer, obviously not the only voice in the room on that front. Didn't butt heads with Eric because they had lots of conversations early on about what mattered. And what's great about talking about adaptation with authors, she was saying, how could they do right by the Mal character? Because she thought as an author she had not. Because, like we said, the story is the chosen one thing, but she hoped it would be more about the grunts as well as those with destinies from up on high, which is a different author attitude towards adaptations, because the author is usually like, oh, they got it wrong, or they couldn't fit all what I wanted in there.
Right.
Wrong
color for that character.
Yeah. She wanted to correct what was in the books. She had said in an interview, she said, I felt that Siege and Storm Book 2 had a soft middle, and here's a chance to get rid of it. And so
she's like, no, good idea. Maybe if I could second draft this.
Yeah. Well, this is the humility. She said, quote, I hope I became a better writer as I've worked. My first book was written 10 years ago. I don't see why you wouldn't apply growing in terms of craft when you have the opportunity. And I found that in the reviews of the books and in what people say about it. Most people say her books get better with this trilogy. And then even a lot of people say start with Six of Crows, the heist series, and then go back and read the other ones because you'll have an affinity for the world. But it may not be as good.
I appreciate just her. She seems like a collaborator. She seems like she can compartmentalize appropriately. And she likes to see an idea improved. And she, I really, really love this about her. I love hearing her speak. I love reading interviews with her so far. Like she just has this amazing tone.
Yeah.
To be that open, be that secure about not being the best. I don't think you could overstate the importance of it.
Fabulous. And the fans obviously there's a lot of criticism if 7-book series, grew up with it, etc. Surely there are people that are like, this is trash. But on the whole,
I want to talk to the people who can't stand the show. They just got it like the book snobbists. It's just like they just don't get.
But it's also hard to keep that attitude when the author themselves is like, oh no, the middle of the second book is slow.
It would be really hardy to be snooty about this when the author is so humble and being like, actually I didn't like that part either.
I would have done this character different. I would have given him more service. Well, they're doing it in the film. So one of the changes that I think is the most interesting is what Eric added to it, putting the two series together, because it's not a page by page adaptation of the books. Because like we said, the plot device for the Six of Crows squad is all different, because they do not interconnect at all. It's set years after.
Right.
So this integrating them into the Shadow and Bone story is almost like a prequel of their story. So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, no, I think that's
the challenge and the thing the heist, the thing they're trying to steal is her, which was something that Eric brought to it as a crazy. He said it was the longest pause in a phone call. It's like, well, this was either a great idea to pitch or horrible as to how to put this thing
either
together.
She's really thinking about this, or she's so horrified I've lost my job.
Dared to suggest such a thing. But it works. And also because the Shadow and Bone books are all Alina's first-person perspective, and the Crows series is third person from all the different characters. So inserting that, it even mirrors the books in a way where the Crows sections is all the parts that she's not witnessing in the film, gives you the other parts of the world and who's lurking around and what's going on.
Right.
Where she is not. So that I thought was cool. And then the other big change is Alina's race is never specified in the book, but it's all based on a white default character.
Okay.
And Leigh was saying her life has never been entirely white or straight, and why she decided to write the novel, her first novel, that way she feels like was sort of unconsciously echoing the fantasy titles she'd grown up with.
There you go.
What she knows. So Eric,
just picking up what's in the zeitgeist, and that's
Yeah.
what you put down. It's like, whoa, that's evident of what is considered the norm in that space. It
Yeah.
just happened.
so Eric and her, when they sat down to talk about
She's
the
an
series-
Israeli-American writer, and
Yeah,
look, she has
yeah.
a white main character for almost no reason.
Yeah. So they both said together, they're like, okay,
Been
what
there.
can this series be? Well, we can do better than this. What would it mean? Because it's the same thing. She's from a border town in the books,
Right.
which is the fantasy version of China or an East Asian country. How would that impact her life?
Mhm.
Borders are not, in some places, a massive wall blocking everything. It's like there's trade in between. It would make sense
Yeah.
that she would be mixed race. And then how would that impact her life as being the hero of this country that maybe doesn't even accept her all the way? Like, all of that stuff fits into the character.
Yeah.
And it isn't just, oh, we need diversity, so let's throw something in there. They tried to say, well, how can we, like I said, how can we do this
Right.
better? What would she have done differently if she hadn't written this 10 years ago? The big driver, as we mentioned at the top, that mixes things up is this Slavic high fantasy, Russian fantasy.
Right.
What
I couldn't really hardly point to anything to compare to it, honestly. I mean, looking at it, I'm like, this just generally, I'm like, it feels like a live action Avatar or something more along the lines of
Right.
what that would be. Really, I think that's where it stands. It's best in
Right.
terms of its technicals. Its production design is beautiful. Their sets are incredible. Their effects are all right. The wardrobes are I think some of the focus. I mean, honestly, the thing that I notice most when I look at frames from other episodes are the wardrobes in this thing. So and all of that evokes the culture. And so when you're seeing all that evoked through the wardrobe and the sets and everything that surrounds this thing, you start to get this sense that I haven't really seen anything that kind of feels like this on this scale. I feel like I've more
Yeah.
seen cartoons maybe or something else.
And then the second question is why?
Right. And so
Yeah.
why? Yeah. So why is this the only one based on some sort of Russian
Mhm.
history when all of the others are based around an English history?
Yeah.
And that's where it ends up standing apart. It's why?
So, and truly, our dear listener who messaged us also pitched it in that way. They said, hey, here's this thing. You missed it. I love it. It's this fantasy story, but it is based on Russian, Slavic mythology, history, culture, etc. So here's why is this novel so novel to us, meaning English-speaking U.S. audience or otherwise.
Right.
And I found an article, which I'll link to, from a Slavic scholar, and they were specifically talking about foreign authors interested in Slavic heritage stories and a couple of the advantages to releasing in this way versus Slavic people, specifically fantasy as well. Foreign authors, write in English, so it can be more easily distributed, or if it was written in its original language, it's very difficult to translate, because not only are the Slavic languages Russian, Ukrainian, etc.,
Right.
they're also Uralian languages, Hungarian, Romanian, Estonian. Like, it is a whole different situation. So writing it in English disperses it better. And then also,
The language economy.
right. B, those foreign authors don't have the baggage of competing nationalisms, animosities, marginalization. Like, they can't be biased in favoring one nation or the other, or somebody labeling them as a Serbian nationalist. It's like, I don't even understand any of that.
Yeah.
So the author of this article says that most of these authors interpret the culture in intriguing, funny, flattering, or very inaccurate ways. And most people do the hodgepodge approach because they'd have to be so historically and linguistically researched to say, I'm going to talk about, and I'm going to base this on Hungary in the 1890s,
Right.
that most foreign authors go the other
Get caught
way.
so in the weeds there. Well, how do you ever justify magic?
Right. Let alone get everything culturally and historically
Right.
relevant or accurate or true. Yeah. So
Are we talking about the effects of the culture and the social economy here, or is this about like a hero's journey?
yeah. So that's where Leigh, I found an article where she was saying she knows some of these things and she could have brought in a Russian translator to go through some of this stuff. But she was even saying using just total Russian for all the place names and everything would not have felt true. And she's also covering her bases, but in a way also like getting to the point of the thing is that it's high fantasy. It's not historical or alternate history. It is supposed to be a melding of all of these things.
Mm-hmm.
But it is funny if you are from there. So I found in this article, this person, which I didn't realize, but it's hilarious, and I'm sure you'll love this. In this Grisha versus Grisha trilogy, most Slavic speakers find the toponym or place name and naming conventions that she uses very odd. And to somebody who doesn't know, it doesn't influence the plot in any way. Right. But if you do know, it is just kind of weird. So the main character, Alina Starkov, should be Alina Starkova, because the surnames in Russian are different depending on the gender, male, female. So a lot of the surnames are wrong for the characters. So it comes across as comedic because it's like, oh, she's a man, or the man villain is a woman, because it's the way that she gives the last names is not correct in the Slav, So she's just pulling, because maybe she thought Starkov sounded better than Starkova, but if you knew that, you'd be like, this is weird.
Right.
Or just comedic in a way.
Yeah.
And the big one that you'll love, the whole magic thing, Grisha, Leigh was saying, so it's the short form of the name Grigory, which means watchful, which is why she used it. Okay. But the Shah suffix, like Grisha, is a short form for Russian names, hence Natasha for Natalia, Misha for Michael. So Grisha is short for Grigory. So it's basically all the magicians are called Greg, which is the short form. Grisha is the short form of Grigory, so it's like they're all called Greg, which is just bizarre.
This is
if you're English speaking, or if you're not English speaking, it's just strange. It's like, and then somebody said it's like calling the magicians Tim because Timothy means honor. It's like it doesn't matter what the name means; it's still just a person's name.
Oh my god!
So just funny stuff like that appears throughout in terms of merging the cultures and not really, assigning it to a particular thing.
That's actually hilarious. Yeah. That would be, if you were in on it, if you knew, that'd be Russian. Hilarious.
Yeah, they're just like, why are all the magicians called Greg? It's not epic at all. Yeah. But you were talking about, you haven't seen this in anything else. I
was trying to name other Slavic influence to, at least on the surface aesthetic stuff and I can't hardly, just off the top of my head.
Well, you'll know this one immediately. Came out also on Netflix, The Witcher.
Yeah,
that fantasy thing with Henry. So that is based.
I did suggest that at one point.
Yeah. That is based on a Polish book series, 6 fantasy novels, 15 short stories. The video game series sold 50 million copies.
Yes.
That is from a Polish author, but it draws on Slavic, Celtic, Germanic mythology. Lots of the monsters are from Slavic folklore.
Right.
And then in the book, Vedmak is the term for a male witch, and it's used as a derogatory term in the Witcher books.
Okay.
So it has a lot of that, but it is an amalgamation, again, of all of it.
Interesting.
And then the last thing that I found, in spite of, as mentioned, the language and cultural barrier, there's also sort of a historical precedent for you saying, oh, why haven't we seen this? And a big piece of it is the relationship to fantasy fiction and the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
So at the time of the Soviet Union's reign, primarily children's tales and stage plays or adaptations of foreign tales are what fantasy fiction is. There was an adaptation of Pinocchio, and The Wizard of Oz was called The Wizard of Emerald City, but literature dealing with supernatural horror, adult-oriented fantasy was not welcomed at all by censors. Because of Soviet censorship up until the 1980s, not really very many books written or published because of the state-run publishing houses blocking various things.
I see.
Such stories, and it's all up to interpretation. It might be critical of the Soviet system, allegorically critical of the Soviet system, not patriotic enough, doesn't portray religion in the way that they want it to. So, and this is my unfounded research, so not sure if this is entirely true, but I had found there's more science fiction.
But it is true that we found it.
Yeah. Well, this particular thing, that there's more science fiction that is used, like the first use of the word robot is from a 1920 Soviet Union.
Oh man, that's cool.
Era play.
Yeah.
But fantasy, mythology, folklore, not so much. And we'd even mentioned in our Animal Farm episode from eons ago, there was a 1922 book called Revolt about animals taking over a farm, which was, again, a metaphor, but then it was banned until 1989. Right. So that was an example of one. There was one main book that did come out at this time called The Master and the Margarita, which I don't know what that necessarily means. But it was written between 1928 and 1940 during Stalin's regime. It has supernatural elements, dark comedy, religious inclinations. There was a censored version that they did publish in Moscow, but then there was a secret underground version that actually had everything in it that was smuggled out and published in 1969.
That pulpy version. Give me that
real
pulpy
deal.
version.
And I never knew anything about this thing, but it has influenced so many things: films, TV, radio, theater, comics, ballet, music. All sorts of artists say, hey, check this thing out. And Baz Luhrmann got the rights to it in 2019.
Oh, man.
So who knows if it'll become something here. But I
it
think
sounds
that's
perfect
also,
for him.
Yeah. Talking about where this thing came from then. So there's a new wave in the 1990s, Soviet Union gone, for fantasy books discovering high fantasy. Almost no gothic fantasy had even been written.
Right.
Post-apocalyptic fiction also becomes huge, which gets turned into video games. So there's the Stalker series and then Metro 2033 are huge video games.
I did not know
all
that.
based on
Cool. Okay.
Yeah, they're all based on Slavic books. So this is kind of where it's like, oh, Leigh Bardugo has her finger on the pulse, pulls this through, and shortly before it's just getting a resurgence in the native countries from whence the mythology and history and culture and all of these things can be presented in a high fantasy way or in a post-apocalyptic gothic way as well. So that's the history of it all from what I could tell.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, as I didn't expect there to be some like clear-cut answers as to why it didn't percolate
and I don't know if
into
that's
the
true.
zeitgeist culturally. But for to not be clear-cut true, I mean, it sounds like the correlation. There's a lot of factors running, but like that, that makes a ton of sense. If there were censors in place to where this wasn't part of child rearing in the Slavic culture for decades and decades and decades, then the stuff just wouldn't exist because there's no market for it. There's nobody making it because nobody's there to buy it because that's not what you do, because we don't show that to kids, and time changes. Here we are in a new decade. But so it's really interesting. I did not expect for there to be no official answer to find something that's like, oh, well, 1-to-1, that makes sense.
Yeah. And the connection between, okay, well, here's foreign authors almost finding a more neutral way to approach it because of their ignorance and their lack of competing nationalism, language, all of that stuff. Does it do it justice as a culture? Instinctually, probably not, because it's such a hodgepodge and the magicians are called Greg, but
it's not for lack of trying.
Yeah, and that's part of the fantasy thing, is it's designed to be magical and unrealistic.
I would hope if you were, into it, you're Slavic, your dad, you know what's going on, and Greg, they're all called Greg. Ha ha. I hope that wouldn't just completely disqualify it from you, like of all merit. Yeah, I would hope that maybe you would get there and be like, oh, that's hilarious. But I would hope that the second thought would be like, well, they're trying, and there's not a lot of stuff that does this, so I'm just glad that it's getting, I don't know. There's something there.
And I'll post a link to the Slavic Scholar article that I read, because they have, here's ones that are foreign, written, and then here's ones that have been translated but are originally from this area of the world. So there is a bountiful group of literature that does now confront fantasy genres in this sphere. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see where this goes. They are already priming for this to be the next Game of Thrones, Harry Potter.
Oh yeah, they're doubling down. They're betting on this as much as they're betting on anything, and it's like out of nowhere. It's crazy. I don't know why. Thematically, genre-wise, it's not similar, but I keep thinking of Bridgerton. That's just got this amazing following that's blooming out of nowhere, and there's going to be so much that comes out of this. So I mean, who knows? This could definitely have some staying power and be around for a while. On a personal note, it's not exactly like my favorite thing in the world, but it's so interesting to see something so different. In terms when you're talking about things like these archetypes of the chosen one and the training of these abilities and those types of things. So it was really interesting to see some of these tropes flipped on their heads, and to see some new fresh cultural influences on especially production design. I really am glad to see it up there, and man.
So thank you, dear listeners and specific listener, for suggesting
Thank you for your suggestion. We had a wonderful time getting into it. So please let us know what you're into. Get in touch with us. Please let us know at IlliteratePod on Instagram. We might just do it. And today is definitely some proof of that. So thank you so much for listening. We can't wait to talk at you next week. We'll catch you then.